Great, thanks very much. Just to say welcome and thank you, I suppose, to Mr. Conlon, Mr. Maguire and Ms. Kenny. You know, great presentations and submissions as well. It's wonderful to see that this legislation is putting the student foremost and centre, you know, in everything that we're doing here. And the increase in student numbers alone, and as you've mentioned there, the numbers of IoTs and our new technological universities, as well as our existing universities. And I mean, the importance of keeping the reputation of our colleges in terms of their ranking, and I suppose I would be thinking specifically here about worldwide ranking and QS rankings and things that are based an awful lot on research publications, you know. So it is about the master's students, the PhD students, and you know those cohorts that are really developing our basis for excellence, I suppose, in our third level sector. I suppose some of the questions I might have, if it's okay, I'll just go through a few. And we're in a little bit of an oven. I'm telling you, I wouldn't mind having a fan. It's getting so warm in these offices here, I'm telling you. But anyway, sorry, so quickly going through it. Just in relation to the HEA and Ms. Kenny, you just mentioned the budget there is 1.6 billion. And I was just curious, from what I understand, the majority of your budget, 80% is core teaching and research, with about another 20% contract, which would probably be SFI and IRC, I'm guessing. And I know previously with SFI, they would have rolled out a type of capital infrastructure for universities that was based on access, you know, where they had an access model. Can I just ask you, what would be the most recent spend perhaps on capital infrastructure? In particular, I'm looking at labs and how we develop that sort of space within our universities and what the plans are maybe along the TUs, if you have anything general on that. That was just a quick query there. Just in relation to Mr. Maguire, very welcome on the QQI, and I suppose we're big advocates here of the apprenticeship programme and how we promote that, particularly in our FET sector. I suppose I would like to, I mean, I think the NFQ, whoever developed that lovely circle of how everything fits in, I mean, it's my go-to all the time. So the NFQ, I don't know, is it the cycle? Apologies, I don't know the name of it. But what I was just going to ask you is along the lines of, you mentioned an overlap with the HEA. Could you just maybe talk to me a little bit about what that overlap is? And then, Mr. Conlon, as you've mentioned, it's 5 decades of a bill, I suppose, a HEA bill, and Ireland has changed an awful lot in 50 years. You know, we are looking at the student numbers. We are looking at how to accommodate probably our new technological universities, and the governance factor I know you've mentioned is very important. You have noted that there's representation from staff and students on that as well, and that it will be competency based. I suppose if I could just ask you what you might see as a metric once this bill goes through, if we were to say to you in 3 or 4 years' time, what would be 2 or 3 things that we could point to as achievements from this legislation? That's not too broad a statement, but just in your opinion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Who wants to take that?
If I come in just with the first question there on capital, but I think Tim might have more information as well from the HEA. But just to say, the capital infrastructure funding in 2021 is up to 106 million in capital infrastructure, and but I imagine Tim may have further information from the HEA on that.
Oh, apologies. Did I mix up the organisations? As well as being called Mr. Kenny, we're mixing up your organisation as well, Ms. Kenny. Sorry.
Not at all.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm tempted to say it happens all the time, but no, we do work very closely together, Senator. Thank you for your questions. We had about 84 million of capital funding allocated to approved projects in 2020. These would include the Higher Education Strategic Research Infrastructure Fund, but also a number of public-private partnership projects which are emerging. And you made particular reference, Senator, to the technological university advancement, and obviously in considering future investment and investment plans, we're looking at where the growth areas are in the system and where the expected demographic growth is to be, but also in terms of new institutions and resourcing those appropriately. So, for example, in the emerging technological universities, they have a particular science and technology focus, and there's a particular infrastructure requirement going to be needed if they're to meet their mission. But certainly we can come back to you with further details on the investment and on plans, if that would help.
Anybody else want to come in there?
Sure, if I can come in, thank you. I'm glad to hear you're a fan of the NFQ fan. it is, as you say, it's a signature of the coherence that we have in our system, both across the further and higher education system. And the apprenticeship, as you mentioned, is one example of that. But it's also an example of where there is complementarity between what QQI does and what the HEA does. So the HEA, initially through the cooperation with Solace in the Apprenticeship Council, and in future through the National Apprenticeship Office, when it's established under the Apprenticeship Action Plan, cooperates on identifying which fields get funded and which institutions, the direction of funding to the institutions. But when it comes to actually setting out what the academic parameters are, that falls more to QQI. So QQI has issued quality assurance guidelines on what we expect to see in programs of apprenticeship, and then we have review processes that see that those are being implemented either directly by QQI in the case of private sector institutions, or indirectly through the reporting that the institutions make to QQI of their activities in, for example, apprenticeship. So in that way, there is you can see that there's obviously some potential for double counting, or sort of double reporting, but that's why we've worked so closely with Tim and his colleagues to actually streamline this, so that they're not saying this thing to QQI one week and something else to HEA the following week.
Well, it's great to see so many courses been regulated, and particularly around the apprenticeship programme. You know, I think it makes it a lot more attractive. And I can see that I think the National Hairdressing one, I think, is their first regulated NFQ we were trying to promote locally as well. So well done, I suppose, working with the groups on it and Solace. Sorry, Ms. Kenny, I apologise. I suppose I should reverse the questions that I posed Mr. Conlon, and if it's okay, I might redirect them towards yourself, if that's okay, if we have time. So, sorry, so the questions, Ms. Kenny, I suppose that I had posed previously, and I'm probably going to lose my own track now, but it was just in relation to if we saw this bill being implemented, I suppose in 3 or 4 years' time, what would you say are, to say, 2 to 3 measures of success or achievement, or just basically measures, I suppose, that we might be able to look to say that, you know, that we've seen progress in terms of the change in the legislation? Would you be able to point to maybe 2 or 3 of those?
Yeah, successful implementation of the performance framework. So the Minister will set the performance framework. It puts on a legal footing then the work of the HEA in doing strategic dialogue to reach agreements and measures on what will be developed by the higher education institutions as well. So currently a lot of work is ongoing at the moment, but there's no legal basis for those elements as well. So we're trying to put a legal footing to those elements that are there. So having that performance framework, coupled then with the strategic dialogue and agreed elements of that with the institutions to deliver on that, which will be aligned then with national priorities as well. So I can see that as being one clear aspect of it as well. And then just looking at strong internal governance then as well of the HEIs. It's getting that balance, as everybody is talking about the autonomy and the accountability, that there's good, strong accountability for that funding that you mentioned, and accountable elements around that for the institutions as they deliver on that, and more transparency.